So the founder of Stevensport, one of the first cities here in Breckenridge County, was Richard Stevens. And Richard Stevens was given 94,000 acres of land for his part in the Revolutionary War. War as hell. I know it was 7 years worth of war. But I have know of nobody who did 94,000 acres worth of work. 94,000? Why does somebody need 94,000 acres of work? And then when you tell me that Richard Stevens got 94,000 acres of land for the work that he did, right? Because did every revolutionary soldier get 94,000 acres, or just the commanders, just the generals? So all the little lowly, privates, the Marines, did they get 94,000? And when he got 94,000 acres, I want to know now who farmed that 94,000 acres? Whose land was that 94,000 acres? I'm willing to bet, even though I have not seen it written down, that Richard Stevens was a slave owning, aristocratic, Indian genocidal fucking maniac. That almost seems to be the staple for any of early Kentucky history. If you were in Kentucky and you had pale skin, you had slaves, you killed Indians. That was a typical Kentuckian. That rule almost never goes away. It's relatively consistent. Over half of the counties in Kentucky are named after slave owners and Indian genociders, and the same is true with the father of Kentucky, the forefather. You have the George Washington of Kentucky is Isaac Shelby, and he's going to be no different. There is a lot of data that's missing on Isaac Shelby. I'm not for sure why. Because he was the father. He was the first governor of Kentucky. He helped establish the Constitution. He helped get it adopted into the United States. June 1st, 1792 would be the date that Kentucky became a part of the United States, and he was there. He was instrumental in all of this. Well, while he was also fighting in the Revolutionary War, he got himself a 5,000 acre farm. So the founder, the father of Kentucky, the George Washington of Kentucky, he only got 5,000 acres. Who the fuck was this Robert Stevens that got 94,000 acres of Kentucky land? You want to know why the land titles were fucked? This is one of the reasons. Virginia's just passing out huge tracts of land to people when it wasn't their land to begin with. And a lot of folks had been living on this land and had houses and corn and was raising crops. And somebody in Virginia just goes ahead and gives that land away, even if you've been living there the whole time. It fucked over, the Lincoln family got fucked over with the Kentucky land titles, and Daniel Boone got fucked over because of the land titles in Kentucky. And the flag of Kentucky, you got a pioneer shaking hands with this well-to-do, dressed sort of long-tailed fucking aristocrat, right? He's got a suit on. His fucking jacket is really long in the back, and he's shaking hands with a pioneer, someone dressed in all buckskin. But basically, it's just the aristocrat saying, "Thank you, Daniel Boone, for discovering my state. Now get the fuck out." So that's me suspecting it didn't make it wrong. Here's another one. Stevens, 94,000 acres. Yeah, I bet he fucking farmed every single acre too, and I bet he didn't take anybody else's land, and I bet you he was real nice about it. Stevensports, and I bet you 94,000 acres. He had to have fucking slaves, and he killed fucking Shawnee in order to take that land. I fucking know it. There's no denying it. Isaac Shelby's going to be the same way. Indian genocider, slave owner. And it was hard to find that he was a slave owner, but 5,000 acres. When he was fighting the Revolution, he was also dipping his hand into the Kentucky land bucket. In 1779, 1780, he was part of the Transylvania Purchase, or the Transylvania Company. So Richard Henderson made a deal with the Cherokee, and then he was able to get himself a plot of ground. He also fought with John Sevier, who had fought against the Chickamauga. In fact, Isaac Shelby used his own money to fight with John Sevier against the Chickamauga. And John Sevier was a fucking psycho. One thing that John Sevier did that was okay in the state of Tennessee. Here's one of the Isaac Shelby papers saying that he requested aid in shipping a slave to New Orleans for sale. All right, so Isaac Shelby, you get to see that he was a slave owner, right? So this is a piece of evidence. And now John Sevier, the one good thing about this man was he's a bad dude. He's a bad man. Okay, here's a picture of him. He's an American soldier, frontiersman, politician, one of the founding fathers of the state of Tennessee. So here's a founding father. This fucking racist asshole piece of shit. He's responsible for Chief Redbird getting killed. Right now you got a national force dedicated to Chief Redbird. It was because of John Sevier's men that Chief Redbird was killed. And then the battle of Yahoo Falls, or the massacre of Yahoo Falls. Women, children, old people was all fucking killed because of this asshole in Kentucky. So he allowed his brutal fucking men to murder an entire band of Cherokee just to take the land and the salt works that was underneath them. And they were going to get educated. So they didn't need to die. They had, they didn't do anything wrong. But John Sevier said, fuck it. Right? John Sevier even was a dick about Chief Redbird. He knew what happened, but pretended like he didn't. And then even though a general Indian war could have fucking broke out, he's still being an asshole. The good thing that I liked about him, he tried to establish a different state before Tennessee, and he tried to establish Franklin, the state of Franklin, named after Ben Franklin. And in the state of Franklin, John Sevier hated the lawyers and the aristocracy so much that he banned all doctors and lawyers from participating in the state of Franklin. Only farmers and workers. So the state of Franklin sounds like it was actually being set up for poor white men, right? For working class white folks. He's got, the British jacket and the fucking little sash around his neck and stuff. So he's all, wearing British goods and looking like a colonial man. But he's not like all into it like some of these assholes who get into their clothing and their dress and sort of like you're Henry Clay, right? He's got the fucking weird ass with the neck. He has the neck collar, just goes up so high it looks like a little turtle head, and every time he turns his neck, his face runs into his own collar. So that's John Sevier. The part about the having a state full of artisans and no fucking lawyers sounds so appealing to me because Kentucky is all about the lawyers. The Constitution right now, Kentucky is totally fucked. It's gutted. It's basically a piece over here, piece over there, and then they string it all together and say, here's the law. But it's really pick and choose. There's so many folks, I would say, that's on the force that don't even know the first 10 amendments to the Constitution. They're taught that we are to be subdued. We're just a fucking people. There's no Sheriff Andy Griffiths around here. Andy Griffith didn't want to go around scaring people with a gun. He wanted people to respect him. And the only way you can get respect for the man and not just fear for the gun is by being a good ass person. So the whole lawyer, Kentucky being a bastion for the land lawyers, because that's how you got land in Kentucky. Once you got land, you had to fight in court like 5 or 6 fucking times just to keep the damn land. One of the first governors actually would make a squatter's law saying that if you had been there for, a duration, you have a house and you had a crop of corn, then you had a right to the land that you was on. But that's the only way, if you was a squatter, that you could get your land. That was only the way, because, hey, this land tract here from Virginia says all this land is mine. Oh, really? All of it's yours? It's all yours? A quick note on some past stuff. Abraham Lincoln had questioned James K. Polk and his reasoning to attack Mexico. He really got into him. He really dug deep. He says Abraham Lincoln wants to say, okay, you said that it was shot on American soil, on American territory, but where? Which Americans had died, and at what spot? Was it in? Was it in Mexico, the disputed territory? Was it in Texas? Was it on American soil? Abraham Lincoln wanted to know specifically where it was. At the time, Americans had voted James K. Polk, who was itching to get to annex Texas into the nation. And once he got elected, he got his war, and then he got his funding for the war. And then people were afraid to denounce the war because for their lack of patriotism, including Henry Clay. So Henry Clay, while objecting to the Mexican-American War to begin with, eventually relents and goes along with it. Henry David Thoreau would actually sit in jail fighting his taxes to not pay for his taxes because of the Mexican-American War. So James K. Polk lies, says that Americans got shot on American soil. Wasn't true. He put the people, American troops, in the disputed territory, basically setting them up for, basically targets. Right? They were shooting ducks, but he wanted a war, so now they could be outraged. What? You killed our troops who was staring at you in your face in the disputed territory, pretending as if they was going to occupy the spot where they were at, taking more than their fair share of land. And it was disputed territory, like I said. So the Mexican officials thought that was their land. Why are you in Ireland? You weren't here before, and now you are here. So Lincoln wanted, he wanted an answer with facts, not with arguments. He wanted the truth. He says, look, you could submit to us in writing all the stuff, but don't give us an argument. We want you to answer fully, fairly, candidly what had happened. We want to know the truth. So the House of Representatives, who was controlled by the Whig Party, passed an amendment faulting the president for beginning a war that was unnecessary. Lincoln, having voted for this legislation, stated to the president that if he proved that blood was indeed shed on the United States, he would happily reverse his vote. So they passed the amendment faulting him. So basically it's like censure. Not that you shouldn't have done that. But it didn't have much bite. He didn't pull the funding for it. Lincoln's willingness to change his vote. He still believed that President Polk was not satisfied with his own positions. Lincoln also stated that his mind is tasked beyond his power, and Polk believed the war would only last 3 to 4 months, cannot show his people a light at the end of the tunnel. So Lincoln's fucking bitch slapping James K. Polk as soon as he comes up and in there, right? But eventually James K. Polk fucking changes the entire, the entire way America looks and added territory to it, beyond the original 13 colony boundaries. So Clay was too aware of the potentially divisive effects that controversies over slavery could have if reintroduced on the national stage. Thus, the Whig platform in 1844 did not reference Texas at all. So Clay fucked up. He basically was saying, we want Texas, we don't want Texas, right? He's being a politician. He's a flip-flopping piece of shit, and that's why Henry Clay got fucked over. He was flip-flopper. You don't know if he was for slavery, against slavery, for war, against war. Who the fuck are you, Clay? What are you saying? You just want things when you want it, but not when other people, like, you just seem like, hey, War of 1812, let's fucking do it. Mexican-American War, nah, let's not do that. What the fuck is the difference there, Clay? So Henry Clay used to be a war hawk, right? Lost 5 presidential elections because he's a fucking loser. And he wanted to run for presidency again, but the Whigs nominated Zachary Taylor instead. So after the election, Clay went on to oppose the war with Mexico, but he voted for war resolutions after the fighting began. So not very good anti-war, right? Just starts voting in line. Lincoln actually called his ass out, right, with the spot resolution. Well, what about the spot resolution? You know what spot resolution I'm talking about. So Isaac Shelby's a fucking asshole. He's a fucking dickhead. You can take my word for it or not. Isaac Shelby, the George Washington of Kentucky. Isaac Shelby, he has right here. He's requesting aid to ship a slave to New Orleans for sale. He's got 5,000 acres. Of course, he's got fucking slaves. In fact, he's got 11 children, and that's I don't know if that's 11 white children that he admits to, but clearly he likes fucking. He doesn't mind having babies, right? So 11 children. Isaac Shelby has 11 children, and Isaac Shelby, he's got slaves. He was an Indian genocidal fucking maniac. That's all he did was kill Native Americans. He got his career started out by killing Native Americans. He ended his career with starting killing Native Americans. He also brought the draft into Kentucky. So when the War of 1812 was being pushed by the War Hawks, Richard Johnson, who killed Tecumseh, and Henry fucking Clay, when they got their war with Britain in 1812, that killed mostly Kentuckians. 1,200 Kentuckians died in the War of 1812, and that makes up 64%. So 64% of the casualties of the War of 1812 were Kentuckians. They took the Kentucky hunters, drafted them, forced them to fight. If you was from 18 to 45 years old, Shelby forced you to fight, and then you died for whatever fucking Shelby was fighting for. He was fighting for his own land, for his own way of life. His father was a plantation owner. So these were all indications to me that he was a slave owner, and then eventually I found that he was. So if you're requesting aid and shipping a slave to New Orleans, probably means you're a slave owner. This is April 15th, 1809, and it's just like the papers. It's Isaac Shelby paper. It says SavannahNow.com. So fucking that piece of shit motherfucker. Isaac Shelby was an asshole. Isaac Shelby was a slave owning fucking piece of shit. If he was fighting for the revolution, for freedom, and to be free of the British rule, but he acts so fucking British. They all act so damned elitist. John Sevier, him being a friend with John Sevier, just shows to me that he's an Indian genocider. He started out at the Battle of Point Pleasant killing Native Americans. He's killing Native Americans at the War of 1812 when he instituted the draft. He also was the person who was, he was the first governor, the first and fifth governor of Kentucky. When they made the Constitution of Kentucky, they had slavery legalized as an institution. And David Rice, the Presbyterian minister who tried to make it illegal, was banned from politics forever. And then George Nicholas was actually in his cabinet, was actually in Isaac Shelby's cabinet. So Isaac Shelby, he has all these slave owners. He's buddies with the slave owners. And he's killing, the Native Americans his entire fucking life. When he made the Constitution, not only did he legalize slavery, but he legalized the Electoral College. So even Kentucky, when they formed the government of Kentucky, they was so similar to the United States government in form and maybe in practice too. But they had a militia, they had a cabinet, the governor was more of the commander-in-chief, and they had an Electoral College. So there was no voting for the senators in the House of Representatives, no direct elections. The Electoral College went ahead and refined the stupid common white man who had property's opinion, right? So they already had a social caste. If you were white and had no land, you had no say-so, and then anybody else, the white, black, Native American, female, younger than 21, none of these people were included in the democracy of the United States. So a revolution for who? Yeah, the change of rulers have changed, but now you got a group of rich, white, wealthy landowning, speculating corporations who was running shit, and then afterwards you had a bunch of rich, white, wealthy land-owning corporations owning shit. So the Bill of Rights, I feel like, is really the biggest revolutionary document that came out of the American Revolution, but without the Bill of Rights, there is no American Revolution. It makes it clear why the United States didn't side with revolutionary France against their war with Great Britain, because they weren't revolutionary. They were more oppressor, aristocrat fucking politicians. They're plutocrats who just want to rule over everybody. Alexander Hamilton wanted to put the entire nation in debt just so that he could fucking own them, just so he could take over. and have power. And so he wanted everybody to fall into debt, have a centralized bank so he could own everybody. And then even Jefferson said the banking industry, that's how they're going to get you. The America won't be taken over by occupation, it'll be taken over through their economics. And if you look at how our economics is working today, China owns us. They own our ass. So Shelby, Isaac Shelby, the fucking George Washington of Kentucky, a forefather of Kentucky. Most Kentuckians don't know about Isaac Shelby. They don't even know who this guy is. So, the George Washington of Kentucky, they don't even know. They don't know who they are, where they come from, and they don't care. So this culture of ignorance is really, it's incredible, because how can you make buildings or raise crops if you're just so fucking stupid? And I think eventually that's going to catch up with Kentucky. There's no fucking way. You have a population of stupid fucking people, don't know civics, don't know the power that they have being citizens of a commonwealth, and they don't, not knowing your own power makes you weak, makes you susceptible to other people that want to manipulate and exploit you. And then it also, not only could it just screw you over, but sort of making you in that desperate situation. You're just, not only are you held to the whims of others, but eventually you might be like, what the fuck? I'm tired of getting fucking screwed over here. Nobody gives a fuck about truth or justice. Everybody's a bunch of fucking assholes. All the laws here have been grandfathered in. So, if you want to just run for the small dog catcher around here, you got to be like, your fucking neighborhood's like court gesture or something. You had to have lived there for 20 years. You got to know the people, and then you have to be like, better than them somehow. But it doesn't make any fucking sense. It's all, it's all fucking game, I guess. But what a stupid ass fucking game. It's a bastion of lawyers. It's a lawyer. The bluegrass is a bastion for lawyers, right? This is for the lawyers to come in and manipulate everybody, make themselves some fucking money. But imagine if there was a good lawyer, an honest lawyer, a lawyer that actually, gave a fuck about people. So, Shelby in 1782, certificate regarding 3 of Shelby's slaves reflects other aspects of Shelby's career and personal life. So he's got a certificate for 3 slaves. Further evidence that he owned slaves. He owned slaves. He had 11 children. He has a wife. He's, been killing Indians and been enslaving people his entire life. Evan Shelby was a plantation owner. He's probably raping his slaves, right? So Isaac Shelby, the godfather of Kentucky, is just a fucking rapist. And you might even be able to put that shit on fucking George Washington, Tommy Jefferson. Or was it rape, or was it, having sex with a villain? Which one is it? We're supposed to believe that Tommy Jefferson was nice to the fucking slaves, right? But you still fucking own them. And that's how you understand people, is that you must own them, then you can control them. So that's more evidence, right? How can you have a certificate for 3 slaves if you weren't a slave owner? We saw for correspondence to sell a slave, down the river to New Orleans. So Isaac Shelby. Isaac Shelby's a fucking dickhead. He's a prick. Here's another thing that I found on Wikipedia that mentioned some sources, but then they just kind of scratched the entire thing out. But it was saying that Isaac Shelby used both indentured servants, right? So, Irish slaves and African slaves as laborers on his expansive farm at Traveler's Rest. So he has 5,000 acres. I don't know if that was the same as Traveler's Rest. He's going to die at Traveler's Rest. That's what is the name of his farm, Traveler's Rest. So he's going to die there. But by whose accounts was he a good master? White Kentuckians, when the article says by all accounts, does that include his slaves? What are the laws ensuring the proper treatment of slaves? According to a family report, the good master from Kentucky and Harriet Beecher Stowe's Uncle Tom's Cabin bore the surname Shelby in honor of Isaac Shelby. So they're saying that even in the book, they said, oh, Mr. Isaac Shelby's just a good old man. The good master. I don't know what that is. What's a kind master? What's a good master? So it almost seems like, yeah, he has slaves, but he treats them right. Supposedly, he called for laws ensuring the proper treatment of slaves. So the only source that mentions this is Robel's biography, Wrobel. Regarding his treatment of slaves, she simply said Isaac Shelby was considered as being kind to the slaves at Travelers Rest. The end of this paragraph says he, Shelby, seemed to have hard-working slaves who looked after the interest of Travelers Rest. Many of the women showed their admiration of the colonel by naming children Isaac or Shelby or both in case of twins. Though it seems a little ambiguous to me, it sounds like the women might be slave women who apparently admired Shelby enough to name their children after him. So that's fucking great, right? He's owning slaves, and they just, Master, we loves you so much. I'm gonna name my kid after you. Are you naming him after me, or is it actually my kid? Regarding the laws, the source lists 5 things that Shelby called for in his address to the state senate. They own fucking slaves. Watch Goodbye Uncle Tom. Not only is he a fucking rapist, but he's also putting them in pens and getting the fucking strong, retarded men to rape the fucking women just to breed new fucking slaves. They had rules you couldn't import them no more, so how else you going to get them? Kentucky was breeding them. They was breeding them to be fucking psychos. The fucking ones who were breeding were fucking psychos, and they were breeding them to be strong. They was looking at them as just an animal. So a strong, retarded, ox is what they wanted. They didn't want a nice, articulate, smart fucking guy. They wanted just a fucking hard worker with a big back. Male, preferably. And if it was female, she could do some work, right? But mostly that was a cum dumpster. That was something for you to fuck forever. Or not forever. Beat up at the same time, right? Feel bad about it, because it's like, we look down upon that. Really? How you gonna stop it? Seriously, if you own something or oppress something, you're just one step away from molesting it. Do this, clean this up, now do that. Now kiss my butt. And that's true today, right, with wage slaves. So at the end of the paragraph, right, it says he seemed to have hardworking slaves who really loved, he had good Uncle Toms. They loved the master more than he loved himself. And when you got, a whole fucking troop of people willing to do whatever the fuck you want, how can you fucking not succeed? Regarding the laws, the source lists 5 things that Shelby called for in his address to the state senate, number 5, and they're literally numbered in the Texas laws compelling the proper treatment of slaves, and then there's no elaboration. So what is this, the proper treatment of slaves business? Maybe you passed it. I would be willing to believe something like that. Maybe, right? They want to be looked at as a benevolent dictator. And so hey, look, I said you got to treat your slaves nice. Even Clay was supposed to have treated his slaves nice, but you got, you got the Richardson, Lewis Richardson, who says that he was getting whipped the fuck out of, right, just for seeing his wife one fucking day. And then Clay says, well, the only reason I had any of them rebel was because I was treating them nice. And so that's fucked up, right? So you think if you treat the slaves nice, they run away, so you just got to be dicks to them always, right? Till the day you die. You can't recognize their humanity. You got to be an asshole to them. It's a will to power. You got to manipulate and control them and tell them to shut the fuck up and do is what you say. So that's this was just sort of the back talk of Wikipedia. So this isn't even posted in Wikipedia, but it says Robel's biography, right? And then it just mentions it in passing a few sentences about Isaac Shelby. He had hardworking slaves. He was kind to the ones at Travelers Rest. He tried to pass some laws for them. They named their babies after him. But that's, again, a third piece of evidence that Isaac Shelby was a slave-owning fucking piece of shit. You own fucking slaves. You're whipping people for no fucking reason. That's assault and battery. You whip a cop, you're going to go to fucking prison for 5 years. Whip a black man, that's just how things are done. Whip a woman, because you could beat shit out of women back in those days, right? You didn't go to fucking prison. So that's where we're at right now. You get hit by a police officer today and you hit him back, you're going to go to prison for 5 fucking years. But if you're a slave owner, you can beat the shit out of your wife, beat the shit out of your kids, whip the fuck out of your slaves for no rhyme or reason, just because you fucking feel like it. Make up some trumped up charges. Oh, they backtalked me. They looked me in the eye. They did this. They fucked that up. It doesn't fucking matter. Make the shit up. And you can hit them and do whatever the fuck you want to do. In fact, it was the police officers with the Fugitive Slave Act. That's where they got their start. So they were the plantation's cops, A slave tried to run away, they had the cops go chase that African American slave. So that's what the cops were there for, to enforce the plantation owner's property. I own you, boy. You're my fucking property. You ran off the land and you tried to be your own man, and for that, we're going to whip the fuck out of you. And that was acceptable, right? Whipping slaves was totally perfectly fine. And nobody sees a contradiction with this shit. Whipping your children, beating the shit out of your kids. Whites used violence to hold black people in their place. That was a structure of whiteness. And now you have, even in the black community, white community, America, all across America, people whipping the fuck out of their kids, beating the shit out of their kids. Some people say that they're spoiled, and maybe there are some people that have spoiled their kids too much. But I would say, for the most part, Americans are fucking Kentucky. They're just backwards, ignorant hilljacks, and they want to have the freedom to beat the shit out of their own fucking kids. You don't own your kids. Kids are catch and release. They need to get out in the world and do something. They're not your pet. They're not your fucking slave. If you truly cared about your own kid, you actually would want to set them up so they would be successful and they would do really well in life. It's catch and release. It's like you caught something wild. You want to educate them what you can, and then push them back out into the wild and to do success. To be successful. Here's some more papers. KDL. It's saying that the provision that federal expensive guards, spies, and scouts for the protection of frontier inhabitants in such industries as salt licks and iron furnaces, counterfeit money, horse thieves, slave stealers. This is what they were worried about. People stealing, other people's horses, people stealing slaves, the return of children captured by the Indians, sale of produce at Philadelphia, landed property in Kentucky, Tennessee, Maryland, and land litigation. So for the provisions of war provisions, right, guards, spies, scouts, for the protection of frontier inhabitants, salt licks, iron furnaces, right, they really want to take over those natural resources. When they finally made Kentucky subordinate to the land laws, they were sitting there saying, let's get a hold of all the coal. We want all the ownership, as the state of Kentucky. We own the coal mines. We own the silver mines, the gold mines. Anything that we might find that has any value under this dirt is ours. It's all ours. So, just gives you an idea of the type of person Isaac Shelby is. And this is before technology, right? So no cars, no vehicles, no phones. I think they were working on telegraphs at the time of the Civil War. I don't know if they were actually around. So, they built all this shit by a slave. This is a slave house that was on Isaac Shelby's land. Where did this slave house come from? Whose idea was this slave house to be in existence, and who built it? I bet you slaves built it. Isaac Shelby thought of the decision, and they did all the damn work. And it seems like it's okay. It's got 2 chimneys on both sides, and it seems like a pretty sound structure, but it's a slave cabin. So another piece of evidence, right? We saw papers for 3 certificates for 3 slaves for him selling the slave down the river, and now we see he's got a slave cabin on Governor Shelby's place on Richmond Road, 8 miles from Lexington. So it's a slave cabin in the graveyard, right? On fucking Isaac Shelby's fucking property. Why do you have a slave cabin? Because you're a slave owner. So Isaac Shelby, he's a piece of shit. He's a bastard. We all know that. And we know that he's a piece of shit bastard because, he killed Native Americans and he owned slaves. So he thought he was better than everybody. He evidently knew the know-how to have a convention, to write a constitution, to get statehood. But I guess he was also had the same sort of mentality as all the people in his in the United States, right? So it's like, wait a second. George Washington looked at Isaac Shelby. You killed Native Americans too. You have slaves that you own and manipulate and control too. Well, you're a buddy. You're a friend of mine. So, yeah. You don't want to. Fuck George Washington. I'm not gonna sit there and say that a man. I have a friend, a black friend, who says, well, I remember reading about George Washington owning slaves and just being like, fuck that guy. Yeah, that's exactly right. If his grandfather just would have been whipped, whipped to fucking death by George. And then once his father, my black friend's father, was to, die, George Washington would be pulling his teeth out because his teeth were falling out. And how do you get teeth? Well, you're not going to have wooden teeth. Who the fuck can chew anything with wooden teeth? So he actually got a set of dentures that were made out of real slave teeth. It's like, wait, you died and you got all those good teeth? Give me those teeth. So again, you're still robbing graves. You're still doing the shit, the pillaging that the Pilgrims started in the 1492, the Columbus. They never fucking stopped. The imperialism, taking of other people's shit that's not yours, treating people like they're less than you, inferiors, oppressors versus the oppressed. Washington would kill his deserters. Washington killed the Miami and Shawnee and the Ohio states. And when it had nothing, these aren't your fucking states, George. You know, the same thing with Mexican-American War. Polk, he's fucking killing Mexicans. One day the Mexicans might say, fuck y'all, that's our fucking land. Just because you beat us militarily once, you know, doesn't mean you get to keep it. If I was just to go to my neighbor's house and I put a gun to his head and said, this is my fucking land now, just because I succeeded with that battle, that doesn't mean the land is actually mine. Most people would say that's a crime, but that's how America's been acquiring their land from day one. You can't go to your neighbor's house and just say, this is my land. You got to have a militia. But with a militia, you're allowed to go into anybody's house, not just one or two people's house, but you could just take over an entire nation of people's and say, get the fuck out. 94,000 acres. Robert Stevens got 94,000 acres of land in Breckinridge County. What the fuck did he do? And Isaac Shelby only got 5,000. So Isaac Shelby was out there. He was fighting. He was like in a bunch of different spots. Right? He was supplies and natives in Point Pleasant and Chickamauga. He was fighting lots of Native Americans all over the place. In addition to fighting the Battle of Kings Mountain, right? So he was fighting the British, fighting mostly Indians, right? He fought the British only a couple times. But Isaac Shelby's was the Western theater of the war with John Sevier and with George Rogers Clark. So that's where Isaac Shelby mostly is. He isn't fighting too many British, just that one time. And I heard he ran away from the Battle of Kings Mountain. So Patrick Ferguson did get killed at the Battle of Kings Mountain. But what was his actual involvement? Isaac Shelby. He stands up and he acts like he's so great and shit. Fuck Isaac Shelby. He ain't fucking great. He ain't a good man. He was able to get, trick people in order to get, him some fucking land. But Isaac Shelby was a fucking piece of shit. You can even just tell. Look at his picture. Look at his picture. Look at his face. Let's mention this here. It says that Isaac Shelby pressured James Madison to give Harrison command of all military forces in the Northwest. So they get this old-ass motherfucker. They re-elect him. He's the 5th governor, right? 1st and 5th governor. And then in 1812, they elected him again. Because the nation was in a crisis and they called up their great fucking general to lead them into battle. And he instituted the draft and took lots of poor Kentucky hunters to go kill some British so we could steal Canada from them. But we did not succeed in killing and taking Canada. In fact, one of the first battles was the Battle of Frenchtown. You sent a bunch of Kentuckians up to Detroit to fight a whole, 12 different tribes of Native Americans, supposedly the British, right? No, this is the same shit. George Washington's killing people in the Ohio region. Henry Knox is there. George Washington's there. They're just killing people there because they want their fucking land. The Shawnee, the Miami, the Mingo, that was their fucking land. But white people kept coming over, and eventually they were savages, right? That's how they was able to exterminate them. Well, we are all proper and we have these clothing and we speak English and we understand how government works and the people who elected us or we appointed ourselves and the other elites elected us with the guise that you all elected us, and so there we are. Therefore, we are more civilized. And because we are more civilized, we're allowed to murder women, children, old people with a glee whenever the fuck we feel like it. It was asymmetrical warfare. So in the War of 1812, he comes back, right, as an old ass fucking man, and he joins in the fucking battle. In the Battle of Frenchtown, you see a whole bunch of fucking Kentuckians die, and they named about 22 counties of Kentucky comes from the Battle of Frenchtown because of the loss of the Battle of Frenchtown, which is one of the first battles of the War of 1812. So the Battle of Frenchtown, that's 120 counties, 22 of them were named from those who had died or had participated at the Battle of Frenchtown. So it just gives you an idea. We're naming counties in Kentucky not after heroes. A couple of them are named after heroes, but mostly out of people who took the command of general, marched all the way into Detroit, and got shot in the head. And they were like, oh, fuck it, let's give that motherfucker a county. Well, you know, he died. All those people died and shit. That could be demoralizing for the people. They might, Kentuckians might not want to battle with wars of imperialism anymore. They might not want to be used as cannon fodder anymore. Madison acceded, rescinding his earlier appointment of James Winchester on the state level. Shelby revised militia laws to make every male between the ages of 18 and 45 eligible for military service. Ministers were excluded from the provision. 7,000 volunteers enlisted and many more had to be turned away. So he got all the men that he needed, but he instituted a draft from 18 to 45 years old. So he was an old-ass motherfucker. He wanted all the other old-ass motherfuckers out there fighting. And that's, you know, that's when the life expectancy was less. So that would be like asking for the you know, everybody from the age of 18 to 60, you know, 5 years old today. You're 65, here's a gun. Get out and fight. Don't be fucking lazy. You're letting all these fucking poor people, poor young people sit there and pay your Social Security so you can sit around fucking jacking off to fucking SpongeBob or whatever the fuck it is you do. Get the fuck out of the house and get some shit done. Damn, old ass motherfucking lazy piece of shit. People want to vote fucking Republicans into office and kill their own Social Security, and then, you know, I'm the one paying for your damn Social Security. Why the fuck should I pay for your Social Security? Y'all gonna vote against it? You're gonna vote for your own, against your own self-interest because you hate blacks and foreigners and gay people more than the other, you know, than you love yourself. The social spending is more important than your fucking racism, stupid motherfuckers. A part of me thinks that's going to be poetic justice, right? Poor fucking whites want to vote for fucking assholes that hate them. You're going to get your shit cut. And if food stamps are cut, you're going to see a lot of poor Kentuckians die of starvation. You did it to yourself for being stupid, for not fucking voting, for acting like you're fucking better than what you are. Yeah, you act like you're all Mr. High and Mighty and you don't get no assistance from the fucking government. Yeah, right. Every single fucking one of y'all got Social Security. Every single fucking one of y'all do. You got WIC. There's you know, programs for children and for women all over the place. What are y'all talking about? Y'all want all that shit to be cut? You made your own damn grave. So I'm gonna cut this actually short and finish up with an exciting conclusion. Isaac Shelby, the forefather of Kentucky, the George Washington of Kentucky. Who is this man? Where did he come from? And what is he known for? So, just I want to make sure that he, you know, that's where the draft is. That's why I highlighted this. I can kind of go through his entire life here on Wikipedia when I come back. His first term as governor, you have this Rennet, the Citizen Guinett affair. So France has, there's a revolutionary France, but Citizen Guinett was left over from the royalist. And he was sitting there trying to raise, you know, fucking privateers, American privateers to help fight the Spanish. And then once the revolutionary kicked him out, he might have been killed if he was to go back. They just said, ah, fuck it, you can stay here. But that's just so fucked up. They was, you know, the United States government was so against the French Revolution that they, you know, I almost feel like the United States is the one that made the French Revolution fail. The French Revolution could have done so much fucking better had they had the Americans. The Americans had France helping them in their revolution. France spent a ton of money to help the Americans defeat the British. But when France needed our help, we had a treaty. They were on our side. We forgot about them immediately. Immediately. And sided with our oppressors who eventually come back and burn down our fucking White House. I think America would have been so much fucking better if we would have embraced the Haitian Revolution, the French Revolution, because it would have shown the world that America truly cares about the oppressed and those who are being beaten up. But we were not there for the Haitians. We were not there for the French, because our revolution was a fucking fake revolution. It was a revolution to stop the revolution. It was a revolution in order to steal Native American land so they could own their damn slaves, so the one group of aristocracy stayed in power that had been in power in the United States for quite some time. You know, fucking Daniel Boone, John Adams, George Washington. These are all fucking British officials. Patrick Henry. All these motherfuckers were British. They were the redcoats. And then when the redcoats pushed them too far, they said, fuck it, we're just going to start our own shit. But they were still the ones who had been putting into practice what the British had set down. When the British says, George Washington, go out in the field and kill some Frenchmen and start the French and Indian War, that's what the fuck George Washington did. George Washington's killing deserters. Where the fuck did he learn this shit? He learned it from the British fucking Empire. So you want to talk about the American Revolution? It's not a fucking revolution. We have never had a revolution. American Revolution was just a protracted struggle for our independence. It wasn't a revolution. Revolutions is a cycle. It keeps coming back over and over again. It's not a war. It's a fight for the people. It's a fight rooted in the people's struggle. And unfortunately, the American Revolution, they forgot the people. They forgot the slaves. They forgot the Native Americans. They forgot the women. They forgot the white men who had no property. They forgot everybody who was under 21 years old. Everybody, the majority of the people were forgotten. And you want to know why we have a turnout rate in Kentucky of 10%? Because we've never been a fucking democracy. Our democracy has been to trick enough dumb fucking people of the muck. Get enough dumb muck people to vote for you, and then you get to do as the fuck as you please. And it's all big fucking game. In fact, for a long ass time, Taft and a lot of people thought that actually going to the people was beneath them. No, I am a distinguished gentleman. I only go to big ass rallies and make big old speeches. I don't go down with the muck and shake their hand and actually look at their faces, which made Andrew Jackson so much more appealing because he had fireworks and he had parades and he was going out to the people making speeches saying, hey, this is me, the man right before you. So that's, that's the aristocracy that we have to deal with. And fucking Isaac Shelby was no better. He had the electoral, we have electoral college. Kentucky had their own electoral college. That's why they had to rewrite the Constitution within 7 years. 1792, Isaac Shelby comes up with the Constitution. He's there for 4 years, and then he's down. They rewrite the fucking thing once he gets back up, or once he gets out. Okay, Isaac Shelby, you had your fucking heyday. Now get the fuck out. So no, we didn't have a fucking real revolution. We've never had a real revolution. Thomas Jefferson said we needed one every 20 years after the rebellion, Shays' Rebellion, which was an American revolutionary who was sitting there saying, we fought for the fucking war, now you're taking our damn land. So even though some of these folks, I would say if you fought in the war, you earned your land grant, but 94,000 acres, Richard Stevens, you didn't do 94 fucking thousand acres worth of work. And then the slaves that you had, they didn't deserve the fucking oppression and slavery you put on them, just like Isaac Shelby. It wasn't fucking valuable, it wasn't right, and it was bullshit. And I will judge you by 2014 standards. If we can look at these assholes as a product of their times, but they were flawed, and they were tragically flawed, then we can start to see, we can start to fix ourselves. But as long as we keep justifying a bunch of genocidal massacring pieces of shit, then all the Abraham Lincolns and Muhammad Ali's and WCP Breckinridges and any of the good people that show their head, that show themselves, that stand up, will be pushed to the wayside because you want to honor a compromised hero like fucking Henry Clay, the great compromiser, instead of a man who was just, couldn't compromise. Tecumseh, the Shawnee. We should be integrationists. E pluribus unum. We're all immigrants. And as long as we maintain this fucking racial hierarchy, this fucking bigotry, this fucking, racial dictatorship, this totalitarian fascist system, as long as we maintain it and say that these assholes are fucking heroes when they're not, then the real heroes we're pushing down in the muck and we're not honoring them. There are real heroes in American history. There's the Willis Russells. There's the Thomas Bramletts. There's the there's a ton of there's a ton of good fucking Kentuckians. And if we're gonna honor the assholes, then we're gonna fucking put the good people. They're gonna fall by the wayside. And so that's the point of being honest when it comes to historical knowledge. People want to excuse it. Oh, it's a different time back then. It was 200 fucking years ago. It was 300, 250 something years ago. That was not that fucking long ago. To say that's in historical years, that's yesterday. And the fucking Roman Empire, they existed for centuries. And they fucking went down. We've only been here for not even 3 centuries. We've been here for 3 centuries. We own the whole fucking world. Now what y'all gonna do? Punchinella, funny fellow, what you gonna do?